So in 2016, I read a book by a gentleman called Peter Thiel. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. The book is called Zero to One. That book was actually instrumental in helping me conceptualize martial because what Peter Thiel said in the book is focus on a small niche market, capture the small niche market that nobody else is interested in. आप उस market को पकड़ लो and use the cash flows from that small niche market to build a colossal business. Today we'll discuss a very big business in America, which is compounded 260x for shareholders over 25 years. It's called ODFL. It's a $40 billion trucking giant based out of North Carolina. And ODFL is, I think, a perfect exemplification of Peter Thiel ka 0 to 1 ka theory. Chota market pakdo, niche market pakdo, and grab it and become a national leader in that and watch how you create a colossal business out of a tiny market. Welcome to Coffee and Investing with Saurabh. Today we are going to dive into a company which has delivered a staggering 260x in the last 25 years. This is a century-old company. It's not a tech company. It's not a turnaround story. Instead, it's a 100-year-old company from Thomasville in North Carolina. Its market cap is $40 billion. It's a trucking giant. The name of the company is Old Dominion Freight Limited, ODFL. Today, to discuss ODFL with us, we have Arindam Mandal. He's our global compounding guru. 3 years ago, in a great stroke of fortune for us, Arindam migrated from Wall Street, New York to our offices in Mumbai, and he's helped us build a superb global portfolio. I am an investor in the portfolio, therefore I'm invested in ODFL, Old Dominion Freight Line, through global compounders. Arindam, you yourself are invested in, right? So before we get into ODFL's success, could you help us understand the trucking industry in America?
Absolutely. So trucking industry is part of the surface transportation industry. So if you think about surface transportation, it is primarily two things: rail and truck. So its total market size is around 1 trillion. Out of that, railroad would be around 200 billion or so. 800 billion that goes into trucking. Now within trucking, there are two types of trucking. One is your point-to-point trucking, like you kind of truckload a full truck.
So New York to Los Angeles. Yeah.
One point to point A to point B. So that is around, I would say, 90% of the entire trucking does point 1 to point A to point B, around $700 billion. The rest, around 80 to 100 billion, that is called less than truckload, LTL. The truckload industry or the regular trucking industry, that is very fragmented. So practically there are close to 1 million operators who are actually, do these truckloads. And if you think about a truckload company, you basically need to buy trucks.
Right.
So you buy 4 or 5 trucks, you can start your company, hire some drivers, and you carry the goods from point A to point B. Given the simplicity of the nature of the business, it is very competitive.
Highly competitive. Yes. Point A to point B, बहुत लोग जा सकते हैं.
And as a result, in every few years, you get a boom and bust cycle. So typically, when a lot of truckers are making money, you're buying more trucks. A lot of people, getting
prices get crushed in a boom.
Whereas the LTL, the less than truckload industry, we'll talk a little bit more about that. It is not that fragmented. So top 5 players, they control almost 50% of the market. Top 10 controls around 75% of the market.
Very interesting.
It is very capital intensive.
Less than truckload is very capital intensive.
Less than truckload is a much more capital intensive industry. As a result, the players are less. And also typical as it happens, if your market size is not big, so you're talking about a $700 billion market versus a $80-90 billion market. People don't get attracted that much. So capital intensity plus not a tremendously high growth or huge TAM, as you put it, that kind of market. So the competition is relatively lower.
So it's fascinating. You're saying point A to point B wala trucking, highly competitive.
Highly competitive, yes.
But less than truckload, ज़्यादा capital intensity, but less competitive. केवल 10 large players in America.
10 large players, 75% of the market. Just to give you an idea, the largest truckload company, the top 2 actually merged, Knight and Swift.
Right.
So they control around 1 to 2% of the total market.
Okay.
Total.
And Knight and Swift are LTL? Less than
that truckload.
Okay.
They are truckload.
The regular truckload.
Okay.
Yes. So Knight and Swift are point A to point B.
Yes.
Yes. Now, one of the reasons actually this is very interesting, right? I didn't realize that the surface transportation market in America is $1 trillion. Folks, just to contextualize $1 trillion, India ki economy is 3.5 trillion, right? So just to give you a sense how massive the American economy is, just surface transportation in the American economy is a $1 trillion ecosystem. That's one of the reasons why 3 years ago, in 2022, my colleagues and I started investing in America through the Global Compounders portfolio. It's just a colossal economy, gives us more room to make money than say many other aspects of our own economy back home in India. So, Arindam, let's come back to ODFL. What exactly is LTL shipping? Can you help us understand LTL shipping?
Right. So suppose, okay, let's talk about the truckload. What is truckload? So suppose you are Walmart. You want to transport a bunch of stuff from the distribution center to the main store. And the Walmart stores are huge, as you can imagine. So one truck, you can load it up completely, take it from there to the final destination.
ठीक है.
So that is truckload, right? Plain and simple. The less than truckload is talking about, you are looking for just in time delivery. And you're looking for things which are not produced in bulk.
Okay.
So you don't want to load up your inventory, but want to make sure that the things are just in time.
So sophisticated electronic components,
Right.
You need it on time, otherwise your machine won't be completed.
Right.
But you don't need one truckload of electronic components. You perhaps need one quarter.
Exactly, because you
Okay.
don't want to haul out the inventory.
I
This
see.
lean manufacturing entire stuff that you
Okay.
talk about, this kind of plays into that theme. Now, so think about the complexities that kind of arise from this kind of setup. So you need to have multiple things in place. So you need to have pickup drivers, which we call them P&D. So you basically go to that place where you need to pick up. So these are not big trucks, small pickup trucks. You
Right.
pick them. You bring them back to the service center. We call them service center. So this is basically huge, monstrous kind of facilities. Each of them actually takes around $50 million to build, almost
$50
million.
million to build a service center.
Service center,
So basically, the smaller trucks
Yeah.
bring the stuff to the service center.
Service centers, right?
Right.
So then you have the dock workers who are basically unloading those things, whatever the
Unloading
goods,
the smaller truck.
smaller trucks, assorting them, and then they are kind of putting them into the Bay Area door.
Right.
Basically, they have multiple doors
Right.
through which they will be channelizing those goods to another location.
Right.
Right. So once they do it, the line haul drivers, basically, there's a kind of assorted stuff, larger trucks. They'll be loading them.
Right.
Right. So they'll be going from point A to point B. So that is the
Okay.
point A
So
to
the
point
larger truck will say there'll be a New York hub,
Huh.
and the smaller trucks will bring the stuff to the New York hub.
New York hub, yes.
It'll be loaded on the larger trucks, and the larger truck might then go from New York to Houston.
Right.
And then at Houston again, there'll be a hub where it'll be offloaded, put in smaller trucks, and
Right.
and the last mile will be
Last
done.
mile will be there. So how do you manage this entire operation? That becomes extremely difficult.
Because it has to be done on time,
Right.
but it has to done at also at low cost.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll become uncompetitive. You have to optimize your fixed assets, which is your that $50 million depot, and your fixed assets are also your trucks, right? You have to optimize that as well.
Yes.
So आपको price competitive रखना है, cost tight रखना है, but on time delivery करना है, and अपने assets को sweat करना है, right?
Yes.
And that's what you're saying. This is trickier, harder than point A to point B.
Point A to point B, yes.
Fascinating. So this is not the kind of thing that can be done overnight. This clearly takes decades to build, and
Right.
that's why ODFL, Old Dominion, being a century-old firm, now sort of clicks together in my head as to why ODFL has taken 100 years to get here. So just to be clear, which part of the economy is LTL shipping tied to?
So it is typically tied. It used to be tied to industrial economy. So they say like
Okay,
it is
yeah.
lean manufacturing.
Yeah.
So you need to transport your goods.
So if if a generator manufacturer,
Yeah.
I need hundreds of components to come in, LTL
Right.
shipping is the way I get them.
Get them from different suppliers.
है.
But of late, given e-commerce has picked up so well, so it is actually playing a larger part, but it is still very tiny. So if I have to think about what can be the
Lovely.
volume growth, it is still more or less tied to the industrial production growth.
With a little bit of e-commerce.
A little bit of e-commerce, yeah. So it has its challenges, but it is still very tiny.
It's interesting, right? Americans don't have quick commerce as yet. It's a very Indian thing. In effect, the quick commerce model in India is also somewhat similar. You'll have a depot, say a Blinkit ka depot hoga, Bombay ke bahar, and then there'll be Blinkit dark stores in various neighborhoods of
Right.
Mumbai, and that's how when I order, say, a packet of biscuits, the dark store delivers to my house. So it's very interesting how India has created a different analog. We have created a B2C ecosystem. America being an industrial economy, industry is not something we've been able to nail as yet in India. America being an industrial economy has nailed a B2B ecosystem. So that's very useful. Now that we understand the basics of LTL shipping and we understand that LTL shipping is tied into the industrial economy, let's get into some comparative advantages. What does Old Dominion, what does ODFL do differently, which allows it to pull ahead of its peers?
The most interesting part about ODFL is that you ask anyone in the industry, everyone claims that they are actually best. You ask anyone in the industry, their competitors, they will say ODFL is the best. And we are trying to get there. Anyone. I mean, you talk to their CEOs.
ODFL's competitors will say that
ODFL is the best. You talk to any competitor CEO, they'll just say that they are the best. We're just trying to be like them.
Wow, amazing.
So that kind of talks about how much of excellence that they have actually.
The Don Bradman of LTL shipping.
Yes. So you look at so basically there are two primary parameters that you can look at because you're talking about the sophisticated customers like industrial customers. So the things that reach to them, that should be in time, because it is not like I'm ordering from Blinkit or Amazon that आज नहीं आया कल आ गया तो मतलब it is not the end of the world.
हाँ जी, मेरा बिस्किट एक दिन बाद.
Right. But if it goes into a manufacturing facility, you have to deliver the things on time.
So if genset का 149 parts are in place, but वो 150th part नहीं आया, genset can't ship.
Yes, right. So your entire value chain जो है वहाँ पे आपका problem.
Consequences are enormous.
Yes. Secondly, something is called claims ratio.
Okay.
Claims ratio means how much of the goods that you have delivered without asking for any claim. In the sense, they are not saying that anything has damaged.
Okay.
So you are delivering the things
on time,
undamaged, right?
Achha.
So their claims ratio is around 98 to 99%.
Okay.
So basically
only 1 or 2% of the time
right.
issues हो रहा है.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are the two main.
How does that compare with the competition?
It is around lower 90s for most of them. It was actually high 80s 10 years back. Now everyone is improving gradually.
So 91, 92 competition है,
yes.
98, 99 पे
99
ODFL है.
ODFL है.
My God.
Right. Then the second thing is of course around the way they operate the service centers. Okay. Just to give you an idea, the next biggest competitor is FedEx. So FedEx, the FedEx, they are basically parcel.
So FedEx also does LTL shipping.
LTL shipping.
So I thought it was a courier company, but LTL shipping.
They do. They are actually the largest.
Achha, okay.
They are the largest, but even their largest, they are not even close to ODFL in terms of their operational capabilities. In fact, for the same service center, like for like, ODFL makes almost 60% higher profit for one service center.
Wow.
So just think about it, like the economics are delivered through multiple layers. So you can utilize your doors more, you can sweat your assets more, right? So that's how.
So even though FedEx is bigger in scale,
yes,
FedEx is bigger in scale, ODFL makes more money per service center. 60%
more. Yes.
Amazing.
Right. So one of the ratios, we speak about when you think about this industry is called operating ratio. The operating ratio used to be, it is operating ratio, like definition is simple, operating expense versus sales. ODFL's current operating ratio is around 70 to 75, somewhere like that.
ठीक है, 20-25%
20-25% का उसका operating margin है.
Margin आता है.
The rest of the guys are in, the good ones are in 85, like that.
Achha,
that's 15%.
Wow. So ODFL is making almost double the operating margin of the rest of the industry, and this claims ratios का 98-99 पे चल रहा है, मतलब hardly कुछ पंगा हो रहा है, 1-2% पंगा हो रहा है.
Right.
Whereas the competition is 91-92.
Right.
So
it shows up in another level. In last probably 10 years or so, they have invested around $5 billion in their gross block, like capex, etc.
Last 10 is 5 billion.
5 billion, I think.
$1 billion.
Yeah,
my God.
Close to that.
Wow.
Last 10 or 15, I don't have the exact years, but they have delivered on that investment. They generated an additional 1.8 billion EBITDA. So 35-36%
on incremental. So 5 billion लगाया, 1.8 billion कमाया. Wow. Right. I mean, this is why America is remarkable, right? This $5 billion investment India में probably Reliance Industries कर सकता है और शायद एक दो और कंपनी होगा. This is a $40 billion अमेरिकन कंपनी. अमेरिका का बड़ा कंपनी तो 2 ट्रिलियन डॉलर मार्केट कैप के आसपास होता है. This is a $40 billion company. They're doing $5 billion of capex in 5 years. Basically
10 years kind of.
in 10 years. Okay, so every other year they're pumping in $1 billion.
Yeah.
And on that capex, they're earning an incremental EBITDA of
35-40%.
Wow, amazing. So how do they get these Don Bradman-esque numbers? I mean, समझ आया Don Bradman-esque performance है, but कैसे in such a competitive industry can you be better than others?
So I mean, at the end, the answer is very simple: focus, focus, and being rational and staying core to their competency. Just to give an example, I mean, when I started covering this sector almost 12 years back, industrial, and it's part of industrial. The most talked about name has always been YRC. It is called Yellow Freight.
Okay.
So they're the largest. At some point of time, I think they had around 25 to 26% of market share in the entire. But if you look at YRC and their history, so they try too many things. First of all, they're the oldest player, one of the oldest players, and they try too many things. So they all of a sudden, I think in early 2000, China was a kind of, everyone wants to be
obsessed
in China.
about China.
Yeah, obsessed about China. The world was.
Yeah.
They started buying some companies in China,
Right.
doing truck brokerage. You have to understand these are very localized businesses. ODFL cannot come to India and succeed.
Because you need to know the ecosystem inside.
Absolutely, yes. Then suddenly they wanted to go into that MBA kind of route, in the sense that you want to invest in asset-light things. So they started operating.
Yellow, YRC.
Yes.
Achha.
Asset light. So they started doing brokerage, truck brokerage, right? So you take basically the margin. So doing all these things, they have been basically distractions to some extent. Same with FedEx. FedEx does so many things. Recently they have spun off the LTL business, but they do parcel, air freight, whatnot. I mean, FedEx does all these things, right? For ODFL, their goal has been very, very clear from day one, that this is what I want to do. I just want to focus on, increasing my service capability. I want to invest in things at times which might not be, that lucrative in terms of initial investment, but over time, it creates a flywheel for you. Like if you're servicing your players better, right? So eventually they'll come back to you. In fact, they've been so disciplined about pricing, even during the recession, if I think about, they're the only guys that actually didn't take down their prices.
Wow.
Okay, so they lost few of their customers, and eventually what happened is like they again came back to them, right?
Wow.
Because they are not getting the service. Now what happens is that if you want to keep your, you kind of compromise on your service capability. As I said, if you are running a manufacturing facility, point in time, those are kind of more important than just delivering things, right? So they control the end-to-end experience of your customer. Right, and with total focus.
So old Dominion and Yellow are, you're saying, study in contrast.
Contrast, yes.
Yellow बहुत कुछ कर रहा है.
हाँ.
Old Dominion एक ही चीज कर रहा है.
और मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूँ क्योंकि in any asset intensive business, scale plays a big role. Scale जिसके पास है, especially this is a commoditized business if you think about it, right? Scale जिसके पास होता है, you end up winning. So Yellow के पास scale था, लेकिन तब भी इन लोगों ने they gave it up to ODFL.
So clearly whoever owns the company, promoters in Indian jargon, a lot of credit goes to them. So who are the promoters of ODFL?
So it is the Congdon family. Okay, so it's Congdon family. They are based out of Virginia in the US. They started this company in 1934, and till I think even now, their family members sit in the board.
And they own a significant amount of stock.
18% of their stock.
So in the US context, 18% बहुत होता है.
So and they have been involved. I mean, in fact, Earl Congdon Jr., who was basically the son of the founder, he ran the company for 45 years.
Wow.
Right. So, and he started as a kind of driver. Then eventually, like everything he did. Right. So, this is kind of in their blood. So they know in and out of the company.
Very interesting. This is why you also love America. Promoter का बच्चा truck drive कर रहा है.
Right.
And then gradually becomes CEO and 45 साल चलाता है. हमारे इंडिया में promoter का बच्चा driver बनेगा तो immediately it become outrage in social media.
Yeah.
Executive management, who's in charge?
So right now it is Marty Freeman. So the CEO changed us few years back. The one who is running it now. But as I said, I mean they always have long tenured CEO. the last one who retired, he ran it for almost 30 years after all junior, right? So they have a long, and they're kind of lifer in ODFL,
Right.
right?
A brutally competitive business for a CEO, from one promoter son to run it for 45 saal, then executive management to run it for 30 years. These are astonishing feats.
Yeah.
Now, as we when we began the podcast, we were saying a point A to point B trucking तो competitive है ही. Even LTL shipping ये भी competitive है. Competitive industry में I learned in college that सारा companies, all companies in a competitive industry have to be प्राइस टेकर्स. जो मार्केट भाव दे रहा है वही आपको लेना पड़ता है. बट आपने यू जस्ट एक्सप्लेन दैट ODFL इज नॉट अ प्राइस टेकर, they're a price maker. What is it that they offer to the customer that allows them to be a price maker?
So they're not price makers also. They say that, this is what I offer you. I offer you the best value for the service.
Okay.
So you think of it as a total cost of ownership. Like you are transporting it, you are getting it delivered at a certain point of time, so you can plan other things much better, right? And as a result, they have been very efficient in terms of investing in their own business.
Right.
Right. So if you think about just capex point, like the 500 million or something that you talked about, ODFL invests almost 13-14% of their revenue in capex every year.
And it's a self-fulfilling loop. आप बता रहे हो.
Right.
You focus on this excessively, you give the customer superior service,
Right.
high on time, undamaged delivery. Customer comes to you, your business takes off, you make 25-30% operating margin, आपका surplus बनता है, you put that back into the business as heavy capex, business grows bigger, efficient, and it's a virtuous cycle that has been spinning for 90 plus years.
Just to give you some numbers around it, ODFL deploys around 13% of the revenue. The second best is SAIA.
So we deploy मतलब capex होता है.
Capex of revenue every year. SAIA does around 8. ARC, like the other companies, ARC based does 2% of the revenue, right? So, in fact, if you look at last 10 years, everyone has been shutting down their service centers. ODFL has actually added almost, I think, 16% more service centers.
Folks, 13% of revenue as capex is insane. India में most successful companies India में barely 4-5% of revenue capex कर पाएगा. 13% of revenue going into capex is crazy. So let's get into the a little deeper into this comparative advantage business. What is unique about ODFL's approach? At a superficial level, I understood that वो focus करते हैं, they give the customer superior proposition, ज़्यादा profit बनता है, reinvest करते हैं. But if you could just take us deeper, what is unique about this firm?
So one thing that they have done brilliantly is that what you can call is counter strategy, right? So they have always invested in times when the others
are retreating.
Others actually
अच्छा,
retreating,
ठीक है.
right? So it helps them in many levels, right? So it helps them to regain market share. And remember, this is an industrial company.
So others are retreating, ODFL is advancing.
ODFL is actually advancing, yes, right? So they're always making ton of cash. They're never in debt. So they're not doing any kind of fuzzy things, right? That is a challenge. That has been a challenge with Yellow. When you're doing this kind of acquisition, it creates problem on your balance sheet. So if you're not doing those things, keeping things simple, you're always cash rich. You can do counter-cyclical investing
Very interesting.
for a longer period of time. So that is number one. As I said, they didn't fire anyone during recession. Okay. Number two, they have been very disciplined around not being unionized. Now, this is actually a big thing. If you think about it, YRC is unionized. The Yellow, the trucking company that I called you, right? So
ODFL is not.
ODFL is not.
Kya
They
baat
have
kar rahe ho?
avoided that. Yes. So 1930s, when they started, in early days, people wanted them to be unionized, and at that point of time, it is still the case that Teamsters, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, you might have heard about.
Notorious people, yeah.
Yeah, James Hoffa, right? The Hoffa family. Yes.
Picture tha, Dustin Hoffman played Hoffa.
Yes. Right. So they have been ruling the roost, and it was actually a ripe time for them. We were going through Second World War. The world is in depression. So at that point of time, we typically resort to this kind of labor unions. One thing they have done very well since then, that they made sure that your business wins. अगर आपका business अगर जीतता है, then you don't have to do all this kind of notorious things, right? In fact, there has been times historically, I think in 1940s, some part of their operations actually wanted to be unionized.
Right.
and there was a big strike
Right.
in Richmond, and the workers themselves actually came out of the union and stopped the strike.
Amazing.
So that is the kind of culture that they have built. That
So basically, 40s was the showdown
Yes.
between the unions
Yes.
and ODFL.
ODFL, and it has actually happened even later on.
Interesting.
I mean, in 1959, I think they acquired a company. They were unionized, so their stuffs were unionized. So, but ODFL refused to sign the papers on unionization. Now, that was actually a bloodbath. I mean, they killed a lot of their employees. They were like drunk picketeers, kind of harassing the families and all. But they've been very disciplined around avoiding these unionized things, right? It helps in many ways. It doesn't let you creep in the inefficiencies that typically comes with it. So, for example, during any downturn, they're investing in newer capacities, but they are not necessarily adding new people. So what they do is they will ask the line haul drivers that you also do P&D, because in anyway आपके पास काम तो है
अच्छा,
नहीं.
लाइन हॉल जो
हाँ,
लंबा
जो
लॉन्ग
लंबा
हॉल चला
चलाता
रहा है,
है.
न्यूयॉर्क ह्यूस्टन चला रहा
हाँ,
है.
so आप P&D भी कर लो,
अच्छा.
डॉक वालों को भी हेल्प कर दो, क्योंकि अभी तो लोड है नहीं आपके
I
पास,
see.
right? So that is a big thing, and they do it because most of these employees, even the drivers, उनका जो 401k होता है, जो पेंशन फंड जो होता है, those are largely invested in ODFL stock.
अमेजिंग. So ट्रक ड्राइवर का पेंशन फंड भी ODFL का स्टॉक.
ODFL का
क्या
stock
बात है, क्या बात.
So I spoke to quite a few people in ODFL when did the research. Their sales team, truck drivers, almost half of their net worth is actually tied to ODFL के stock.
My God.
And in fact, if you look at the entire pool of their 401k, almost 40 or 45% of 401k is in ODFL stock. And now it is good for them.
So just to be clear, when you are speaking to the ODFL salespeople, they're openly telling you
Yeah.
कि हमारा पेंशन का आधा वैल्यू ODFL का स्टॉक ही है.
Yes. That's the rest of the, basically that entire wealth is that, because the
Tied
company has
into it.
compounded that much, right? So it has actually grown so much. So that is the second leg, that you developed a culture so well that eventually it feeds into your feedback loop.
But a lot of credit to the promoters here. I mean, these come across as they're strong people,
Yeah.
right? Morally tough. पंगा नहीं ले सकते इनके साथ,
हाँ.
right? Union के लोग भी कोशिश करते तो पंगा नहीं ले सकते. And that shows that the mental fortitude and discipline shows both in face-offs with the union as well as in how they deal with downturns,
Right.
how they focus the business on just one thing and one
Right.
thing alone. So tell us a little bit more about these people. Sound like remarkable people. Tell us a little bit about the Shuruati story of this firm.
So started in 1934. So Earl Congdon Senior and her wife was Lillian Congdon. She was actually involved in the business of
Amazing.
real estate. So
1930s में the promoter's wife was involved in the business.
So they bought a
क्या
single
बात है.
truck with $1,700, if I'm not wrong.
क्या बात
That $1,700 is now probably, if you adjust for inflation, it's probably around $250,000 or something like that.
Probably the best truck ever bought.
Right? And they used their house as the service center, and eventually they released a grocery store to use, and then used it as a service center. So that truck used to go from I think Richmond, Virginia to Norfolk.
अच्छा.
Okay, वहाँ पे करते थे. So Commonwealth of Virginia used to be fondly called as Old Dominion.
I see. Okay.
Okay, so that is where the Old Dominion freight line name came.
I see.
So that is how they started. Now, at that point of time, remember, 1930s, a notoriously regulated industry at that point of time. So you cannot operate, if you want to operate in multiple states, you have to have multiple license, and it was actually cumbersome. So you cannot really go beyond your city, like the
state in which you are
state level.
housed. Yeah.
So they kept on, building the business around Virginia. Then eventually they went into North Carolina, right? And when you say the headquarters is in Thomasville in North Carolina, I mean in 1960s, I think they moved their headquarters from Virginia to.
I see. So the North Carolina headquarters is only 50-60 years old. पहला 30-40 साल ये लोग
हाँ,
Virginia में
Virginia
थे.
में थे.
अच्छा.
So in this meantime, I mean, what they did is they tried to expand by buying smaller operators in different states.
Okay.
That was one thing.
So this was the acquisitions took place through the 40s, 50s, 60s.
50s, 60s, mostly in the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Okay.
1980, the deregulation happened.
अच्छा, कोई भी ट्रक ऑपरेटर कहीं पे भी जा सकता
हाँ.
था.
So that became open.
Take off.
That was the kind of takeoff moment for these guys.
Fascinating.
Right? And eventually, as I said, like till 1990, I mean, I think 1991 they did the IPO. So
Right.
everything was actually sitting right in the alley, and they actually capitalized on it massively.
Wow. So just tell us more then IPO के बाद क्या हुआ 90s में?
So 90s, it was like, so people, first of all, I mean, it's a trucking business, right? So 90s was the kind of the decade of cleanup. So the truckloads used to do LTL also, to some extent.
I see. Okay.
But they never found it very useful.
Because deregulation was recent, everybody was doing everything.
Everyone was doing everything.
ठीक है.
So what happened is that people understood that, okay, people not understood it, but they thought that the market is too small for them.
For LTL.
For LTL,
Achha,
right?
तो
So
point
everyone
two.
went to, buying more and more trucks, moving around. So the market got consolidated over time.
Fascinating.
Right? So these guys actually, given that the market was moving that way, more a boom and bust kind of cycle, right? And people are leaving their service centers empty because they want to do trucking business. So they bought quite a few assets at that point of time, almost going bankrupt, things like that. So accumulated asset between 91 to say 2003-4. But after they stopped actually acquiring anything. So if I remember, I mean, in the between 1990 to 2008, probably there are two significant acquisitions. When I say significant, more than 10% of the revenue are acquired by a single company. From 2008 onwards, they have actually not acquired anything.
Wow.
Okay, so basically 90 to 2008, they took benefit of the downturns to
And
bulk
industry
up their
fragmented to consolidate
किया पूरा बैठ के
Brilliant boss.
4-5 में. And by the time they actually came to that 4-5, that time frame, they actually got into a scale where they can run all this efficiency and all these things. So 2008 onwards, I don't remember any acquisition that they have done. Interestingly, despite not doing that, they have compounded their earnings at around 24-25% CAGR from 8 to.
So the reason I'm loving this is 2016, our colleague Pramod Gubbi gave me a copy of Peter Thiel का 0 to 1. ठीक है. So it's remained the book that has influenced me the most. So 0 to 1 में क्या सीखा मैं? So Peter Thiel says in that book that if you want to build a large business, very counterintuitive thing Peter Thiel says, if you want to build a large business, focus on a tiny niche industry that other people are not interested in, completely dominate that niche, right? And from that niche generate surplus cash and then keep moving in concentric circles outwards, right? So the 90 years ago, the Compton family decided to focus on LTL shipping. They dominated the niche. As a result, जब deregulation आया, they were the best placed to conquer the country, and effectively by these acquisitions that you're describing, that's them moving in concentric circles, grabbing the whole of America.
Yes.
And now they are by far the most profitable player in the industry. So this is Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 thesis playing out over a 90-year period, right? And it's remarkable, right? Doing something which is counterintuitive, which is just focusing on something which is niche, turns out to be a strategy which gives you 260x compounding since IPO in 91.
Right. I mean, the longer term view helps in multiple ways. For example, they have around 255 or 260 service centers across the US.
Wow.
And these are actually large cities, right? And these are actually strategic assets. As the cities
Effectively,
have
every
grown.
large city, they'll have a
Yeah.
service center.
And they own them.
Right.
They're not leased.
So only FedEx will have more than them, right?
Kind of equivalent.
अच्छा, FedEx के बराबर है.
Yeah, almost.
Right. So let's just zero in a little deeper on two aspects. आपने अभी तक discuss किया है focus and simplicity, right? Focus. The family's done the same thing for 90 years. The CEOs have focused on just one industry and very simple. हर एक शहर में एक बड़ा depot जैसा and these P&D, the pick up and drop drivers, bringing the chota trucks to the depot, right? Just go a little deeper into this and tell us more about how this simplicity and focus has worked out so well for these guys.
So, again, it comes back to the fact that, the utilization of every driver. Right. So, utilization of driver is the highest. If you look at the throughput through any of the service centers, it's 60% higher profit margin, right? That shows up in many layers of the company. Another thing that is not often talked about is that the attrition level at driver level, right? So if you think about it, getting drivers is not easy. even actually it is getting even more and more difficult over time as the new age, Gen Z, they don't really want to drive a truck, right? They have so many gig jobs happening.
As well as these drivers are very well paid now, right?
Their drivers are very well paid. Their bank balance sheet is literally at millions because of
एक एक मैंने सुना है कि $2 लाख मिलता है, $2 लाख मिलता है ट्रक चलाने के लिए.
मिलता ही है. And they need newer trucks also, by the way.
Okay.
Because उनको experience अच्छा होता है. The more the newer the truck is, right? So you need basically ये जो they have capital, surplus capital that helps them in many ways. You get the best of drivers. You can retain them for longer. As long as you can retain them for longer, so you don't have to train them again and again. So the attrition level at ODFL is around, I think, 10%. The rest of the market is around 17-18.
बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, राइट? सो कार्ल मार्क्स एंड यूनियनिस्ट का बराबर सोच था कि कैपिटलिज्म में वर्कर को निचोड़ा जाएगा, उसको तोड़ दिया जाएगा, उसको एक्सप्लॉइट किया जाएगा, राइट?
Right.
बट इन अ वे ODFL is the hardcore industrial capitalism.
Yeah.
It seems to hinge around looking after the worker, paying them really well, and then helping them deliver at a high level of excellence.
Yes, especially in an industry where that was never the focus.
Very
Delivery was
interesting.
not the focus. I mean, you move your freight. If you ever were moving your houses, you think about the hassle that you go through just because moving freight from one, like your house is moving from one place to another. You really don't expect much from them. Now, if you can do it really well, people are happy to pay you more.
Yeah. To be fair, I don't think Karl Marx had the Congdon family in mind when he wrote the Communist Manifesto. He had the typical promoter जो ढीला सोचेगा, अपने ड्राइवर वर्कर को एक्सप्लॉइट करेगा. ठीक है, अब ग्रोथ पे आते हैं. We've already mentioned that 25 साल में 260x बना है. Can you give us a sense of the underlying earnings growth in the business?
Yeah, so 25 साल में 260x बना है, but if you look at you can probably the initial years you don't have the real data in terms of the EPS, etc. Numbers are probably a little bit fuzzy in the sense they're not making that much of profit. The numbers are pretty low. But if I just look at last 20 years, simplistically, their EPS has compounded around 55x. The stock has done, I think, 72x or something like that. There are three components to it. One is the revenue. Revenue has grown around 11-12%. I'll give you how that worked. And then operating profit has grown at 22x. And the rest is a bit of buybacks, a bit of tax cuts, etc. that has happened over time. Right. So the 12% composition, how their revenue has grown. The LTL market in last 20 years has compounded around 4 to 5%. So
Okay.
4.5.
ठीक है.
Now remember, this last 20 years has been very unusual because last 20 years we have seen industrial economy basically moving out of US to China. It's been a huge deflationary kind of situation if you look at last 20 years, right? Despite that, this industry showed around 4% of pricing. So that
4% price hikes.
pricing, 4% of pricing.
Okay.
So that shows actually they showed them the path during the recession. They didn't cut prices and they remained profitable. Eventually the industry adopted to it, right? And then in 2004, I think their market share was around 2.5 to 3%.
Right.
And at that point of time, the total market, almost out of the total market, I think around 35 to 40% was with unionized carriers.
Right.
So like the YRC, Yellow, ARC-based, like those companies. Now their market share is around 12%.
Right. So in 20 years, they've gone from
they are
3
from
to 12.
Yes.
Right.
So basically, almost half of the share shift that has happened from non-unionized to unionized to non-unionized, that has been grabbed by ODFL.
Okay. So basically 3 का 12 किया मार्केट शेयर
हाँ, वो जो 9% एक्स्ट्रा है, यूनियनाइज्ड का 35% मार्केट शेयर था, अभी शायद 17 या 18% है.
ठीक है.
तो वो जो 18% शिफ्ट हुआ है, उसका आधा has been captured by ODFL.
And just to step back, you're saying that in spite of China grabbing US manufacturing, last 20 years में pricing growth every year
Has
in
been
the
around
trucking was 4%. Volume growth probably is close to zero, right?
Yeah, 0 to 1, yeah.
So volume growth is 0.1%, pricing growth 4. Therefore, overall trucking industry by value has grown at around 5%. Because ODFL has grabbed so much market share, 20 साल में 3% share से 12%, that market share grab has allowed it to grow earnings by 55x in 20 years.
Yes.
Right?
Revenue by 12%. And then eventually, if you think about it, it's a highly operating leverage kind of model, right? Where fixed assets are getting sweated. Their operating margin went from 10% to 30%.
Right. So revenue is going at 12%, earnings are growing at about 17%.
Earnings are going at 25, 26 actually.
Wow, what are you saying? 25, 26%?
Operating profit around 18, 19. Yeah.
So revenue 12, operating profit growth 18, 19, EPS level पे
25,
25% compounding over the last 10 or 20 years.
20 years.
Unbelievable compounding. Unbelievable compounding. ठीक है. We'll come to valuation in a minute, but before we get to valuation, ये तो sounds great, and with Trump saying make America great again, sounds like बड़ा पैसा बन सकता है यहाँ पे अगले 2-3 साल में. But before we get into the valuation piece, risks क्या है? पंगा कहाँ पे हो सकता है?
Panga, first of all, you shouldn't expect that kind of 20-25% growth because your base
नहीं
has
आएगा.
become,
25% and it's good नहीं आएगा.
so it is like base has become so large. So the way I think about it is, the industry has grown at 4 to 5% without any volume growth. Now, if you like make America great again and all these things happen, you might get a say 1 to 2% of industrial production growth. And if you are talking about inflation staying higher for longer, or say from 1.5% inflation to say 2.5%, that can give you another 1%. So your market can actually grow at around 6-7. They're already at 12%. I think over say next 20 years, that 12 goes to around 20, 21, because still 18% of the market is with unionized operators,
Right.
and out of that, ELO actually went bankrupt last year.
अच्छा, okay.
Right, so there is a chance of massive
Of
market
share gains.
Yes, right.
ठीक है.
So that will take you to a revenue growth CAGR of say 9 to 10%. Now the operating leverage will margin level will show up big, but the impact will be lower because you're already the margins are at say 25 to 30, right? So if that can go to say 35 over that time frame, it gives you another 2%, 3% on the operating profits. The operating profit can compound at low double digit, 11, 12. And then they can do buybacks if they don't have any other place to invest.
फिर 15-16 से EPS grow कर सकता
हाँ,
है.
then mid teens पे आपका जा
ठीक है.
सकता है.
So अगर mid teens पे EPS growth है, what is the fair value if you look at forward PE basis, fair value कहाँ पे बैठेगा इसका?
Yeah, so my view is that, look, I mean, the longevity of the business is enormous. When you have pricing power in any industry,
इसको तोड़ना बहुत
इसको
मुश्किल है.
तोड़ना मुश्किल है. So longevity is enormous. That is not a question. The question is, S&P gives you a return of around 9 to 10 over a long period of time. How long you can give this 15%, 14, 15? That is the question. So that if you look at the stock trading at around 30 times, 31 times PE forward, you're basically talking about 7 to 8 years of things are kind of baked in. The 7-8 साल तो ये कर ही लेगा 15%, that is baked in. So on top of that, whatever you get, that is basically the alpha opportunity, the additional opportunity that might come through. Right, so that is one way to look at it. You also asked about the risk thing, right? What are the risks to the business? So one thing is definitely size. I just spoke about it. The second thing is that the involvement of Congdon family has lessened over time. Right now, one of the kind of side effect of that has been, I think, some of the senior guys are leaving to the competitors. Right?
Okay.
The reason is not that draconian by any means, but the fact is that when Marty became CEO, so there are 4 or 5 candidates who could be the CEO.
Right. So naturally went
somewhere else. But again, that makes the competition, that might make the competition a little more better, right?
Because there's certain processes that are unique to ODFL.
ODFL, right? So those are the challenges, but as I said, like it is a very steady company in a cyclical sector, right?
So remarkable firm, and especially given that India में logistics में इतना कुछ होना बाकी है, right? We don't really have a world class logistics player in India, perhaps other than say a Blue Dart. If those who are listening want to know more about ODFL and its drivers of success, what are the resources they can turn to?
So there is a book called Old Dominion Freight Line.
Okay.
And it was written by, I think, Jeff Redingen. He's keeping our promises. That is the name of the book.
अच्छा ठीक है, I'm sure Amazon में मिल जाएगा. So Old Dominion Freight Line किताब का नाम है. Keeping Our Promises is the subtitle.
Right. So it talks about, I mean, the reason I liked the book, I mean, I bought it. It was released, I think, in 2011. There's actually very nice pictures.
Okay.
historical pictures of their old trucks, and I am a kind of truck lover, to be very honest.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think
they,
most
you
of us
can,
are.
yeah. So those are kind of very nice pictures. So yeah, it is worth buying
Yeah.
the book.
I wanted to be a bus driver initially, but I think I'll settle for a truck driver. $2 lakh milega saal mein. I'll happily drive it. Other than this book, anything
Not too
else?
much of written
ठीक है.
material. So again, it's kind of a good stock, but not often spoken
So
about.
hopefully our podcast will become a required resource for
Huh.
anybody who loves trucking and ODFL. Thank you very much, Arindam. This was a lot of
Thank you.
fun, and hopefully, folks, you enjoyed that briefing on one of the most remarkable companies I have heard about for a long time, a trucking giant, 100-year-old trucking giant, which grows earnings at 24, 25%. That was ODFL, Old Dominant Freight Lines. Thank you so much.
Thank you.